Great, welcome back everyone. Hope you've been able to enjoy some lunch, chance to catch up with some industry colleagues. For those of you who have not met, I'm Johnny Boston. I'm the Leasing and Business Development Director for Offshore Wind here at the Crown Estate. I'll be chairing this afternoon's session. Thanks for your engagement in the day and for staying with us. I've got particular responsibility for our future leasing programme, so that's what we might look at doing beyond round 5, and I'll speak to that briefly in a moment. Really hope you found this morning informative. I know there's been a lot of information to digest and a number of questions coming through on Slido. I think our favourite question so far is just about the Wi-Fi code and whether that ominously was chosen by the Crown Estate. I can confirm it wasn't. I'm glad we've been able to get a backup option out there, but thanks for the question. And I'm pleased to say our leasing team will be back up on the stage in a moment to run through some Q&A as Matt talked to earlier. The rest of the afternoon will focus on some of the other work streams associated with round 5, as well as the chance to get some external perspectives from some further guest speakers and panelists. Before that, though, I just thought I'd share some thoughts on how we build on the round 5 proposition and what might be next for offshore wind leasing at the Crown Estate in the coming years. And we've heard quite rightly this morning about some of the great successes that offshore wind has had over the last couple of decades. I've been in the sector since 2002, so I've seen a lot of change and tremendous success. But I think we're all aware that we can't rest on our laurels. To sum it up, from my perspective, what got us here isn't going to get us there. So we're going to need to collectively, I think, evolve our approach as we move forward. And as we move for much higher levels of deployment, I think it's clear some systems level challenges are starting to emerge, particularly around planning and transmission. And as you'll have also seen, we're keen to pursue broad value creation, so in social and environmental value. I think we're all aligned around that ambition and really important to consider the best ways for that to come through, learning from what we're doing on round 5 and looking at the options for the future. So with a deep portfolio at the moment, we believe there's a little bit of time to look at these issues. And I'll just talk briefly to some of the key themes we're considering. First of all, the level of coordination in the system. We've all enjoyed the benefits of a very market-led approach in the UK, but we believe more coordination is going to be needed as we move forward to tackle the twin challenges of net zero and nature recovery. And we intend to work in tandem with organisations like National Grid ESO, who are pulling together the Strategic Spatial Energy Plan. We'll also need to consider how we coordinate with other marine sectors and the needs of nature, and our own route map work in terms of leading work on a route map to navigate towards net zero is something we'll be talking about more in due course. Gus mentioned it earlier. On our approach to site design, you'll see we've taken a significantly more active role in site identification for round 5, and we intend to continue to do this as we develop further capacity in the future. We believe it enables a more efficient offshore design to be pulled forward in light of all the pressures and constraints out there. And early site identification also enables earlier HRA, earlier transmission design, and earlier surveys, as we'll hear about a bit later. On the scale of leasing, there's quite a bit of uncertainty on how much capacity offshore wind is going to be able to deliver and be asked to deliver over the coming decades, but it's clear there's going to be more growth, and we're keen to take quite a targeted approach on that. So to try and bring forward good quality sites and de-risking those and scaling leasing, so we've got a set of projects where there's good confidence in the need for them and good confidence in their delivery, and we believe that will help enable acceleration overall. And we're also keen to provide some more forward visibility on leasing plans than we have been able to in the past, and that's something we're currently looking at. And finally, on the technology front, we expect future leasing will include a mixture of fixed and floating wind. We've taken the unusual step on round 5 to focus on commercialising floating wind, and I think for good reason. But in the future, we expect to see a blend of those technologies. We need to continue building on the success of fixed, and we obviously need to continue to support floating to enable commercialisation and costs to come down. And we're also including in that, obviously, the provision of more Celtic Sea capacity in due course, which we're aware is all important for investment in the infrastructure in the region. And all of that really plays into our key objectives of seeking to accelerate the deployment of offshore wind and the pursuit of broad value as the Crown Estate in line with our strategy. So you'll have seen in the autumn statement level of potential ambition out there in terms of potential further 20 to 30 gigawatts of seabed leasing by 2030. That would include consideration of the additional capacity of 12 gigawatts in the Celtic Sea. And we plan to share more on our early thinking around the themes I've spoken to through the spring of this year, so do watch this space. For now, though, I'm going to bring us back to round 5. And first up, we've got some videos from some senior political figures, but it was great to hear direct from the First Minister and the Minister for Climate Change this morning. We've now got a few messages on video from their colleagues in Whitehall.
Offshore wind is a British success story we can all be proud of. In 2020, I stood in the Commons and delivered my maiden speech on its incredible growth. 4 years later, we've cemented our status as a world leader, and we're home to not just the first, but the second, third, fourth, and fifth biggest offshore wind farms in the world. Now, thanks to our unique skills and experience, we've also stolen a march on everyone when it comes to the next frontier, floating offshore wind. At over 25 gigawatts, our floating offshore wind pipeline is the biggest in the world, strengthening not just our energy security and decarbonising our economy. It will secure the future of our legendary oil and gas workforce by securing green jobs as we steadily transition away from fossil fuels. By establishing a new floating offshore wind sector in the Celtic Sea through Leasing Round 5, we can spread that growth and ensure that economic benefits are felt across the UK. And don't forget, this first 4.5 gigawatts is just the start for up to 12 gigawatts of further capacity in the region. Together with the Crown Estate and the Welsh Government, we're focused on developing the infrastructure and supply chains required to harness the full potential of the Celtic Sea. So please make the most of today. Help us find the scale we need to deliver cheaper, cleaner, more secure energy to millions of customers and write a new chapter in the amazing success story that is British offshore wind power.
Benandar, good afternoon. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person, but I'm delighted to have the opportunity to share my support with you on this important day. Wales has a proud history of generating energy for the people of Wales and across the whole of the United Kingdom. Floating offshore wind in the Celtic Sea is the next chapter of this history and is central to the UK government's vision for the South Wales economy. I'm excited by the potential of this new industry to not only provide clean, affordable electricity, but to drive economic growth across the UK, creating high-quality jobs and playing a key role in decarbonising our heavy industries. Today opens that next chapter through the first phase of commercial development in the Celtic Sea, Leasing Round 5. I'm grateful for all of the interest shown by you in progressing the opportunity to bring 4.5 gigawatts of floating offshore wind online. This is only the beginning for the Celtic Sea. At Autumn's statement, we announced that up to 12 gigawatts of further capacity will be brought forward through the 2030s, creating a huge opportunity for new renewable energy capacity and strengthening economic and social growth across South Wales. The UK government is committed to supporting the vital port infrastructure and supply chains required to deliver floating offshore wind projects in the Celtic Sea. We are investing up to £160 million in the Floating Offshore Wind Manufacturing Investment Scheme, FLOMIS, to support the growth of the flow industry across the UK. And I was delighted to announce 2 new freeports in Wales last year. The Celtic Freeport, supported by up to £26 million UK government funding, has the potential to unlock significant investment in the floating offshore wind industry through manufacturing, installation, operations and maintenance. This will grow the onshore economic benefits of floating offshore wind. We will seize every opportunity to create the right environment for this once-in-a-generation opportunity. I look forward to continuing working with the Crown Estate, Welsh Government and of course with all of you to ensure our vision for the Celtic Sea becomes a reality. Please enjoy the rest of the day and help us to continue our proud history of generating electricity for Wales and the rest of the United Kingdom. Diolch yn fawr.
I really value the work that Crown Estate does for our country. I worked with them in government between 2008 and 2010 to kick off offshore wind, and I really admire the dynamic leadership that Dan Labad and his team are providing. Now, floating offshore wind is a massive opportunity for Britain, and I again really admire the work that Crown Estate is doing to drive floating offshore wind forward, working with developers, working with ports to make sure that we have the infrastructure we need. And I want to assure all of the people who are there today to listen to the Crown Estate that if there is a Labour government after the next election, we are absolutely committed to driving forward at maximum pace floating offshore wind. This is a huge industrial policy opportunity for Britain. It's absolutely crucial to the work we are doing to decarbonise our power system, and I know that in Britain we can lead the world in floating offshore wind. So I hope you enjoy today. I hope you get the valuable insights and information that you need, and I hope to be working with you after the next election with a Labour government to benefit Britain and to create the wealth and jobs and opportunity that we can together.
So Gus mentioned this morning the really strong political support we've seen for the sector over quite a long period of time and great stable policy, and I think these messages, just really great to hear, such supportive messages, I'm sure you'll all agree, from such senior political figures, and combined with what we heard in person this morning, that really just demonstrates the breadth of political support for the sector, for the work that you're doing, and for this programme, which is really fantastic to see. As you'll have seen on the agenda, there'll also be an opportunity to hear directly from senior officials in both UK and Welsh governments, as well as industry later in the afternoon. But for now, we're into our first Q&A session of the day, and Matt Wrigley, our programme director, is going to act as chair for that. Matt, over to you.
Thanks, Johnny. Hello again, all. Okay, so this is our first question and answer session for the day, so the moment that a number of you have been waiting for. In a moment, I'll introduce the panel, and then I'll explain the procedure for the Q&A. I think it's important to note that this question and answer session will focus on the material that we've covered so far today. So primarily focused on spatial design and the leasing round, and that's the panel that sort of fielded on the stage for that purpose. There will be a second question and answer session later on, which will cover some of the more specific de-risking elements, which are the later agenda items. So if you have questions on some of those elements, if you can just hold those up for later, we will get to those. So on stage, I'm joined again by Simon and Nello, who you met in the leasing presentation this morning. Next, we have Nicola Clay, our Head of Energies and Infrastructure. Then we have Joe, again, who you met on the stage earlier. And then towards the end of the panel, we have Caroline Price, our Head of Nature and Environment, and we have Mike Blair, Senior Technical Manager. So that's the panel. So for this session, many of you have been busy putting questions into Slido, so thank you very much for your enthusiasm. There's quite a lot there, which is really good news and does sort of demonstrate the level of interest that we have. What I've done is that I've done a review of those questions, and what we've tried to do is match those questions together so that we cover off as much ground as possible by answering a selection of the questions from Slido. And then to prove to you that I'm not just cherry-picking questions, we're going to do the second half of the question and answer with a roving microphone. So if there are things that don't get picked up, there's a chance with a roving microphone, and we'll split the time about 50-50. Of course, we probably won't get to answer every question in this session, and it's not our intention between now and the launch of PQQ to answer every specific question, but we will be putting out a further frequently asked question and answer pack between now and PQQ release. And then I'll flag again that once we get into the tender stage, we will have a clarification question process where we can really get into the nitty-gritty of some of the detailed questions that you'll need resolving at that point. So we've got about 40 minutes, and rather than listening to me waffle on, I'm going to suggest we crack on with a few questions. So I'll start with a quick one to warm us up. So Nello, this is coming to you. How can I submit a question after Bidders Day? Let's see if you can see if you were listening in my intro there.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. And I think, yeah, you clearly have already answered, but just to repeat and for clarity, the mailbox, round 5 mailbox is still open, so you can still submit questions there before the official PQQ start date. Our intention is not to respond to all questions. We will, as Matt said, we will try to have a frequent asked question document, let's say, that we will publish before the PQQ date, and where we will try to capture most of the most recurrent clarifications. But from the PQQ date, the portal will be open, so there will be the opportunity for you with the messaging system to ask all the questions and with the right forms, and we will provide all the details at that point. So you will have time before submission to ask any detailed questions.
Great, thanks Nello. And just while you've got the mic up to your mouth, I'm going to come to you with a second one, which is, does the requirement for offshore construction experience require an offshore developer who has development and permitting experience only to partner up?
The short answer, yes, because the criteria, all 3 criteria, so development, consent, experience, construction or construction management experience, and also development experience are all, let's say, criteria that will be evaluated. So a company that only has 2 of these will need to partner with another consortium member to meet the other criteria. And they can meet the different criteria with bringing forward one example for each of the criteria, even different projects. They don't need to be the same project.
Great, thanks Nello. Okay, so Nikki, I'm going to come to you next with a couple of questions on ports which have come up. So I'll take these one at a time on ports for you. So what does early commitment to the nominated integration ports mean? What decisions are there to change or amend port decisions in the future?
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Matt. So yeah, good opportunity to respond to that question, because I know that the ports thing is new and it's innovative, and we've intentionally done this. We want to be able to solve the problem of the supply chain. So the use of early, I think if you actually read that as timely, you will know which ports you want to use. You will be liaising with the port operators, and what we want to know is that your plan works with the port, that the port is going to be available. So think of that as timely commitments. And also to say we're not specifying the type of investment or the type of contracts that you should have with the port. That is for you. What we will do is hold you to account for what it is that you provide to us. And then the second question, which was about changes to ports.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
Yeah, so we've asked you to specify 2 ports on the basis that if your first port either isn't available, hasn't been developed, something might have happened to mean that you cannot use it, then you have a plan B. So that's why we've asked for those 2 ports to be put forward in your bid.
Thanks, Nikki. I'll do one more ports question whilst we're there. So are there any ports leaders here today? And would you like to advise on the best way for developers to engage with them?
Yeah, so thanks. So we have intentionally not invited the ports leaders to be here today. We wanted to focus today on you as the potential bidders. We will be engaging with the ports in a sort of a round table session in the coming weeks to share the tender with them. We've been engaging with them throughout the design of the tender process as well, so they are well aware of this. And I think many of you are involved in things like the Celtic cluster, where the ports and the developers and other members of the supply chain are already there. So we don't want to get involved in your contractual discussions with the ports, so I'm not going to tell you how to actually start those approaches, but I'm sure that you are already very much on the case with that.
Thanks, Nikki. Okay, a question here on the characteristics of the PDAs. So radar still features as a constraint for PDA 1. Was radar treated as a hard constraint, and can TCE share more information on the nature of the constraint? So, Joe, I think this is one for you, please.
Cheers, Matt. So, short answer, is it a hard constraint? No. In respect of PDA 1, we obviously know that there is civil aviation interference or an interaction. We've been engaged with National Air Traffic Services since the start of our spatial design, and are aware that there is mitigation available at a project level. I alluded to it in my presentation a bit earlier, but we should make bidders aware that the Ministry of Defence air defence radar will be dealt with at a project level, and it may be required on all the PDAs.
Great, thanks, Joe. Okay, we've got a couple of questions down here on the auction in ITT Stage 2. So I'll take these one at a time, but they're both going to come to you, Simon. So will each bid be kept anonymous, or will all participants be made aware of who has submitted each figure? So if you could just explain a bit about kind of what happens with that information during the intervals, please.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So the simple answer is, within the auction process itself, everything will be on an anonymised basis. So when I was talking about the information that we'll give in the interval, you'll effectively see the number of compliant bids, the number of bids on the PDA, but we will not be disclosing who has bid what effectively during the auction period, post-auction, so by which I mean post-receipt of the option fee deposit, post our HRA conformity check. Then at that point we will publicise both within the auction process itself and to the wider public who the winners of each of the PDAs are. And my expectation is that we will then also publish the prices.
Great, thanks, Simon. And the second one, which pertains to that part of the process, what is the timescale from winning the tender to payment of the option fee? Okay,
so the very short answer on that one is we'll tell you when we publish the auction rules. It will be dependent upon when the auction ultimately closes, but we're talking about hours or potentially into the next day. We're definitely not talking about days. And it's just worth reiterating what I said earlier. The Crown Estate will be only collecting option fee deposits from your solicitors, so you will need to make sure that your solicitors are in funds.
Great, thanks, Simon. So there's a couple here on the kind of form of answer that we're looking for in responses to PQQs and tenders. So, Nello, I'm going to read both of these questions out and ask you to answer them both together, please. So the first is, will you provide an answer template for PQQ, e.g. to provide financial responses, etc.? And the second one, will the template for ITT1 include word counts, page limits, etc.? So just a little bit on filling out responses, please.
Yes, thank you, Matt, and thank you for the questions. For the PQQ, yes, we will have a spreadsheet for the financial envelope, financial answers, where you will be required to enter basically your data, some of the data from your audit accounts. And the spreadsheet basically will give you, as I was mentioning earlier on, it will give you the results and see if you pass the various tender parameters. So there will be, this process, so you will have to provide the accounts and also fill the spreadsheet. And when we will be evaluating, we will be checking those entries from the spreadsheet. Similarly, at the PQQ, for the technical questions, there will be specific templates to guide you to the answers. And for the ITT stage, so ITT 1 stage, yes, there will be again some templates for the technical questions in particular, and there will be guidance on the word count, on limits, let's say, number of pages. We will provide all the details. So, and just to give you an idea, also, for example, for the social value, for the plans that we are looking in your submission, we are not expecting War and Peace or big essays, but we are, for example, looking at 4 pages responses, so very succinct and punchy plans with your commitments, for example. But all the details will be provided. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Nello. Okay, so Caroline, I'm going to come to you with a question on environmental interventions. So when will TCE share environmental interventions? And then there's a second part. Is there then a risk that not including environmental commitments in the bid will lead to protracted contractual negotiations for AFL entry? So 2 slightly different parts.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Thanks for the question. I think you touched earlier in your presentation in terms of the timing of when additional information is going to be available. So that the information that Matt set out in his presentation in relation to the sort of long list of potential interventions that you might like to think about will be shared when the rest of the information comes out later on this year. And I think just to take the opportunity to reiterate that that list is very much intended to inspire and shape and help develop ideas, but certainly no expectation or requirement for you or any of your kind of colleagues to pick from that list in developing your proposals in terms of positive environmental outcomes. We're very aware that you've been doing lots of thinking and working and developing partnerships around this space for some time now. So really very much your opportunity to bring that forward when the time is right and kind of share that with us and your ideas. And then so to that sort of question at the end is related to timing. The short answer to that, is it going to cause protracted issues, is no, because it will only be those consortia or developers that make it through to preferred bidder status who will need to develop out the detail of those plans. So there's plenty of time to think about that and to kind of run it in parallel and separate to the more detailed sort of legal and contractual processes that you'll be going through.
Great, thanks Caroline, thanks for bringing that to life a little bit for us. While we're down that end of the panel, I've got a couple of questions on the kind of technology and engineering. So first one, and Mike, sorry, this is coming to you. The first one, is fixed, albeit deep foundations technology explicitly excluded from this auction? So I'll let you take that one before I come to the next one.
Yeah, sure, thanks, Matt. Yeah, so fixed bottom is explicitly excluded. One of the objectives of the leasing round is to accelerate those technologies that can allow us to access water depths of 100 to 150 metres or greater in future, and fixed bottom doesn't fulfil that long-term objective, so it's excluded.
Thanks, Mike. And then a further question, and this question has 2 parts. How do you define a floating turbine? And could floating turbine technology more associated with fixed bottom offshore wind be utilised across this project? Okay, so the second part I think you've already addressed, but how do we define a floating turbine?
Yeah, so in the run-up to ITT1, we'll provide a technical envelope, which will include the precise definition of floating wind, which will be used for eligibility. The working definition, which we've engaged on before, has 2 parts. So it's got a technical part, which says that the floating turbines or the substructures will have to rely primarily on buoyancy. And then there's a second part, which is a non-exhaustive list of examples, which includes semi-subs and spars, barges, TLPs, and buoyant columns. The reason that's still working is that we are in active conversation with government to make sure that our definition for Leasing Round 5 aligns as closely as possible with the future CFD eligibility definition.
Thank you, Mike. Okay. It's quite a challenging one, Nello, then I'm going to pass to you on MLOC. So if MLOC limits bidders' bids based on audited financial accounts, then the richest consortium can bid higher, so they always win. Please explain.
Yeah, easy one, huh? Yes, I think I tried to clarify the concept during my presentation in the sense that MLOC is considered like a ceiling to make sure that you can afford and you show that you've got enough cash available to afford what you are bidding for. But it's not, let's say, the amount that companies or consortium may elect to bid. So in the auction level is managed by the Crown Estate starting, and then it will be changed on the various rounds through the process. And the MLOC is basically just a theoretical ceiling that one consortium can bid on, but every bidder will have their own strategy and the amounts that they dedicate of the cash that they got available that they can dedicate or bid in the process. So yeah, the MLOC is not, let's say, a reflection of the fees bid.
Great, thanks, Nello. Another one here on the kind of PDA characteristics. So Joe, another one for you, please. A disposal site covers PDA 1. Can TCE share further information on the nature of the disposed material, please?
Yep, for sure. Cheers, Matt. So we engaged with CFAS directly on this. This is a historical kind of legacy disposal site. Reporting stopped in 1984, and based on our conversations with CFAS, we believe it to be a sewage slurry disposal site.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, so there's a couple of questions here on social value that I'd like to take from the Slido, just to make sure that we cover that content, and then after that, we're going to flip to the roving mic. So if the microphone bearers, yep, you're ready, we'll sort of get going after this series of questions. So, Nikki, there are two questions on this that I'm going to hand over to you, please. So the first one is TCE's intent for creating social value is commendable, but how will you determine pass or fail at ITT1? How ambitious do you need bidders to be or not?
Okay, I'm really pleased to get this question because actually I just wanted to tell you a little bit about why we're doing this. So we are looking for partners who share our purpose, who share our ambitions for the region, for the UK. And the social value is a really good way of doing that. So you heard this morning from the First Minister, the Minister for Climate Change, about direct impact, the value for people in Wales that they are looking to see. So you've heard the challenge, you've just heard the ministerial messages, you've heard the opportunity that we are all looking to create from this leasing round. So we spent a lot of time looking at how do we build in social value into this tender? What do we do? It's the first time we've done it. And we've landed on an approach that we think you are the best people to actually determine what the social value should be. So we are going to be, in these questions, we're going to be asking you to set your ambition for what you want to do, what you can deliver through your projects. And then we will look at that, and the evaluation will be simply, is it credible? And then what we will do is we will hold you to account to deliver what you've said. So as Jess said earlier, we'll be contractualizing those commitments. So actually, the opportunity and the challenge is all for you. We've set that framework, we've set that level. Everyone involved in this leasing round and floating wind has made it clear what we are looking for, and now it's over to you to deliver.
Thanks, Nikki. And the second social value question is more on the how than the why. And it says TCE previously referred to utilising the UK government social value model for the first time in ITT1. Does TCE still intend to utilise this model?
Yeah, sure. So what we've done is we've used the themes from the social value model. So we've maintained those themes in terms of skills and employment and things like that. But because we are turning this round and saying, what is your ambition? What we haven't done is use the thresholds or use the detail of the questions. It just didn't work for us. So we've aligned with those themes. We've made it appropriate for this leasing round, and we're also being really clear that it's going to flow into the CFD, the process that's developing with DESNAS as well. So, yeah, so that's where we've ended up.
Great, thanks, Nikki. Okay, so I think we're going to flip to the roving mic. So I can always refer back to, I've got a couple more Slido questions, but I don't want to exhaust them before we've got the chance for others to ask questions. So the way this will work is, if you've got a question, please pop your hand up. I'll try and pick you out. If we can get a microphone to you, we'll get it to you. If you ask the question, and then I'll try and sort of bring in someone from the panel to respond. So Katie, I think we've got someone with a hand up. This person in the, just to the right of the middle as I look at it here.
So, diolch. A couple of questions, hopefully quick. During the PQQ, Alwyn Thomas here from Statcraft. Sorry, I should have introduced myself. When you're pro-ratering for the consortium at the beginning and the financial metrics, should that pertain to the ultimate parent guarantor that's providing for the process? And then second question is on the later phase of the tender. I don't know whether you want to cover that later or not, but when you've got 3 PDAs and 3 different bid price auction processes going on that you might be, how will they be run in parallel at the same time? Thank you. Deal.
Great, okay, thank you. So let's take those in turn. So the first one, Nello, I'll pass to you, please. So this is about how prorating the PQQ financial standing works across, sorry, was it specifically with relation to guarantors or just different members of a consortium?
Guarantors.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Okay, so to the separate backers, be that the consortium member or a guarantor?
Yes. No, in case the consortium elects to rely on some guarantors for some of the members, the financial standing of the guarantor, so the financial accounts of the guarantor, will be used to pro-rata basically the tests. The guarantor needs to be an entity in the group that has at least 10% stake in the bidder entity, whether it's the sole bidder or the consortium member. That's only the requisite. So basically, we will use the financials of that entity only. We are not looking at parents or other group members. So you will tell us which company to use, provided that meets that requirement of 10% stake. And then in terms of percentage, how this will be managed, it's, again, you will tell us how much you want each of the members, or the guarantors in this case, will contribute to the financial testing. And this doesn't need to be necessarily aligned with any structure or shareholder structure that you intend to put in place. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Nello. Sorry, I should clear my throat off my phone.
Yeah, I tried to find your glass, but I found the water, but not the glass.
Okay, and then the second question, I think I'll refer to you, Simon. So this is about the 3 PDAs, and if we have sort of in the auction, we have the ascending clock auction escalating the prices, perhaps at different rates between the different PDAs. Is that happening simultaneously or over a different time period? If you could take that one, please.
Yeah. So apologies if I didn't make that clear enough earlier. So we will run the auctions for each of the 3 PDAs at the same time. So in each round, we'll give the price for each of the PDAs. You'll be able to bid on one of the PDAs only, and we'll effectively stop the auction when we've identified a single highest bidder for each of the 3 PDAs. And as I say, when I talk about a single highest bidder, it's a single bidder for each of the PDAs that we are looking for. So all PDAs are auctioned at the same time.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Any other questions? I'm struggling to see hands from down here, so okay, thank you, Katie.
Hello, I'm Karen Andrew from Scottish Power Renewables. Do the Crown Estate plan on publishing a list of the pre-qualified bidders in advance of the ITT1 stage?
Okay, yep, thank you. So, Nella, I'll hand that one over to you. So is the Crown Estate intending to publish a list of pre-qualified bidders?
No. Basically, the intention, the identity of the bidders will be only for the preferred bidders, the winning bidders at the end of the process. Throughout the process, no. You will be informed through the portal on a confidential basis.
Okay, thanks, Nello. Any other hands out there? Yes, there's a person in the middle near the top, and then there's Katie, if you could come down to the middle towards the bottom here as well, please, in the 4th row up. Just along here.
Yep. Paul Livingston, SSC Renewables. So if all the PDAs are auctioned off in parallel, what's the mechanism that stops one developer or consortium winning multiple PDAs?
So in each round, you'll only be able to bid on a single PDA, and we will have effectively rules that will set out at ITT stage 1, but as I say, you will not be able to win more than one PDA. So we will effectively take the highest bid from an individual, and then we will look at the other bids that have been made on the other PDAs, but we'll set out the clearing rules in the auction rules which will come out at ITT.
Okay, thanks, Simon. And Katie, yeah, just in the middle here. Thanks.
Thank you. Ian Stout, Lizarb. So for a consortium that has multiple members, and this is about the PQQ, so, and one or each of those members are claiming the technical capability in this case, does each of those consortium members, is there a minimum threshold of equity in the consortium that they have to achieve?
Okay, so Nello, do you want to take that one on technical
Yes.
capability and equity share, please?
Yeah, no, the two are not linked. So you can be a consortium member and bring your technical expertise and leave, for example, the financial standing to other members of the consortium. So you will tell us that, for example, for financial, that specific consortium member will contribute 0%, for example, to the test. But at the PQQ technical questionnaire, you can reply and provide an example that this specific bidder instead has in terms of technical experience.
Okay, thanks, Nello. There's another one, there's another hand person. I'd almost say kind of the hardest place you can possibly get to, Richard, with the microphone. I'll just see if anyone else has got a question, if they can pop their hand up and I'll...
Thank you. Mark Hazelton from EDF Renewables. So I have two questions. The first one is in ITT2, what is the purpose of the exit price and how would that ever come into action, into force? And the second question really is on the social value templates that you mentioned earlier. Is there any possibility of getting early sight of those at, say, the PQQ stage so we know what the requirements will be and what the Crown Estate are looking for?
Okay, let's take those in turn. So I'll come to you, Simon, first on ITT and exiting the auction, and then Nello will come to you on social value templates.
So thanks, Mark, for your question. So as I've indicated, in each auction round, you can make a single bid, and if you are not prepared to, not able to, whatever the right word is, meet the auction round price for any of the PDAs, then effectively you will exit the auction round at that stage. And at that stage, you'll essentially be able to bid a price on a PDA that is between the auction round price for the last round and the current auction round price. So if the current auction round price for that PDA were 20, for example, and you bid 19, that would mean that you would be exiting the auction, but that bid of 19 would be taken as an exit bid. And if you were ultimately the highest bidder for that PDA at 19, you could still win that PDA. And it's possible that the auction round, the auction sort of stops 3 or 4 rounds later, but you could still be the winner with that bid of 19 that you made previously. Again, it will all be clear through the auction rules, but hopefully that gives you the answer that you're looking for.
Okay, thanks, Simon. And the second part of that question was just on social value templates. So, Nello, do you want to just, I guess probably with reference to the information in the information memorandum, and perhaps give us a bit of flavour as to what sort of the extent of information we're going to be looking for on social value, for the social value plans, please?
Yes, thanks, Matt. Yeah, I was about really to point you to the information memorandum, so where at least you've got the list of the plans that we are looking for the social value. In terms of the requirements, there will be templates for each of these. And just to give you an idea, I think there will be a maximum of 30 pages for all these plans, for all these 7 plans that we've got in the social value model. In terms of templates themselves, they will be provided at ITT1, but we think that there is quite a wealth of information in the already in the IM, and if there is any specific question that can be asked, let's say at the beginning of ITT1, so giving you still time to prepare your answers in detail.
Okay, thanks. Now, I'm just going to take a time check. Have we got time for a few more questions? Okay, great. So, any other questions in the audience? Oh, brilliant. Okay, one up here, please.
Hi there, Seamus McCabe, Courier Generation. Is there when it comes to the ascending clock auction and the start of that process, given that there's going to be 3 site awards, do you have in your mind a minimum number of bids you're going to set internally as a requirement to run the auction? Is it 3, or will it be higher to ensure that it's competitive?
Okay, thank you. So minimum number of bidders for the auction. Simon, do you want to take this one, please?
We clearly expect that we will have a competitive tender process. We've already indicated that we are not limiting the number of people that would go through at either the PQQ stage or the ITT stage. Would I be disappointed if we only had 3 bidders? I would clearly be very disappointed if that were the case. We expect that we're going to run a very competitive tender process, and hopefully the number of people that we've got here today indicates that that will be the case.
Okay, thanks, Simon. Okay, so there's another one in the middle here, please, Richard. If anyone's got a question that they want me to get a mic to after that, Katie, there's one down here in the middle as well, please. Thank you. And then to hear afterwards, please, Richard, yeah. Okay,
thanks,
sorry,
yeah.
go on.
Sorry, yeah. Rob Morris from EDF Renewables as well. Just a really simple one. When are you expecting to publish the auction rules and all the finer details around that?
So Simon, quick one for you, I think.
Yeah.
Publishing auction rules.
So the auction rules will come out with ITT 1, and Nello indicated that would be in August. As I say, what we'll allow you to do is to ask us clarification on the auction rules. We will also let you red flag the auction rules, and I can't remember whether I remembered to say earlier, but effectively we will run a process, so you'll see how the software and the process will work for the auction before we run the auction live.
Great, thank you.
Great, and if you could just pass that down to your right, actually. So I'll take this other question in the middle, and then I'll come over to the right here. So go ahead, please.
Thank you, Philippa Powell from RWE. Where can bidders access the design envelope used for the plan level HRA?
Sorry, could you? I was writing that down, and you finished before I'd finished.
Where can bidders access the design envelope used for the plan level HRA?
Okay, so I think I'll pass that one down to Mike, please, at the end.
Yep, no problem. My colleague Sean is going to be speaking more about the HRA later today, and there's going to be another Q&A panel, so the opportunity might come up again. But essentially, when the HRA is published, which we're targeting next month, all of the assumptions that fed into the environmental modelling will be clear in that reporting.
Okay, Thank you. And there was a question just along here. Let's just get the microphone along.
Thank you, Simon Franey from Equinor. Just a question on the environmental benefits and the plan that needs to be included as part of the AFL. Do those benefits need to be realised within the boundary of the PDA, or could they be more broader across the Celtic Sea region?
Great question. Okay, so I'll pass that down to Caroline. So do the environmental benefits need to be constrained to the PDA, or could they be across a broader region?
Great question. They absolutely don't need to be constrained within the PDA. When we were looking at how to approach this, we really wanted to think about that broader resilience piece across the region. So for some of you, that will be about the PDA and kind of focusing in terms of the other work that you've got going on. But for others, the real strength and value that you'll want to bring goes beyond that and talks to that wider resilience. So absolutely, please don't feel constrained in that way.
Thanks, Caroline. So another question just down here in the middle. And is there one up there? Yeah, if you carry on up there, please, Katie, and Richard, if you could.
Just a very quick one following on from that. Sam Pettifer from Scottish Power Renewables. You mentioned there that potentially compensation could be put outside the PDA. In terms of the lease for that, I guess that would be a separate legal negotiation, would it, if we needed to do environmental improvement out with the PDA?
Yeah, sorry, Caroline, go on.
Yeah, so compensation is something that will be dealt with separately to kind of broader environmental value. So I'm keen that we don't kind of confuse and conflate those things. And I'll let Sean pick up anything on around that a bit later if that sort of recommend that falls up later. But I think in the event that one of the positive outcome initiatives that you take forward has with it broader or additional consenting requirements, then yeah, absolutely, that would be something that would need to be worked through in the fullness of time.
Okay, thanks, Caroline. Another question.
Hello, Ian Stout again from LISARB. Similar question, but on a social value front. Do the plans have to be specific for the Celtic Sea region, or can they go wider than that?
Okay, so Nikki, I'll let you pick that one up, please.
Yeah, so they need to be associated with the Round 5 projects. Some of the social value requirements need to be in the UK, but all of them have to be associated with the Round 5 projects, and that will all be made clear when the information is shared.
Okay, so I think we've got time for probably one or two more questions. So there's another one just up in the middle here, please, Katie, and then if we've got one more question after that, I think we've got time.
Hi, sorry, it's me again.
That's okay.
Just following up on the final auction round, Simon. So is my understanding then that you have to commit to your PDA bid right at the beginning of the final auction process, so that if you get kicked out of, say, PDA 1, could you then flip into PDA 2's auction process halfway through that auction process as well?
Simon, I'll let you take.
Thank you. So I'll start with this. I'll start this with a subject to the detail of the auction rules, which you'll see at the start of the ITT. You will be able to change your PDA. So you could do your first round auction bid on PDA 3, for example, and you could conclude in a subsequent auction round that you wish to move to PDA 2. But there will be some sort of fine print in the rules around that side. But in principle, yes, you can change the PDA as the auction progresses.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good question. Thanks, Simon. Okay, so last question up in the middle here, and then I think we're going to go to a short break. So if you just, yeah, shoot.
Hi, Chris Williams, DP Energy. Just wondering whether you'd thought about seabed leasing for any ancillary work such as wet storage?
So seabed leasing for ancillary work, wet storage. I don't know if, Simon, you want to take that one.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry. My understanding is that the panel who are better for addressing this one are going to be later this afternoon. So let's pick that question up then. So if you could just hold that question until the afternoon panel, please, and we'll make sure we pick it up. Okay. I did promise one more question, and I think we ought to answer the last question on this panel. So I think there is one more just up in the middle here. So let's do one more, and then we'll pause.
Thank you. Jisoo John from Corner Regeneration. I was wondering if you could allow a bidder to, for the PQQ technical requirement, I was wondering if you could allow a bidder to refer to a guarantor in terms of the technical expertise or experience, because it might as well be the case that a bidder might have been spun off as a subsidiary of a larger investor recently. So.
Okay. So Nello, can you just take that one in terms of use of guarantors for technical expertise, please?
Yes, yeah. We are not actually calling them guarantors. We use the term guarantors for the financial support and financial tests. But the concept is similar in the sense that you can draw the experience to pass the technical criteria from any member of your group, on the condition that this member has at least 10% stake in the bidder entity, which can be the sole bidder or any consortium member entity. So yes, you can take from a wider group and corporate experience. Yeah. Okay.
So we're going to call this panel to an end. Thank you for the level of participation. Very grateful for that. We're going to take, I think, is it a sort of a few minutes just to, like we did in the morning session, just to stretch legs, but please stay in the auditorium. This isn't a kind of full break just yet. And then Sean will be on to talk about the HRA.
Okay, thank you all. We are right on time, so many thanks to Matt and the team. Thanks very much to everyone for all your questions. Really great to see the level of engagement, and thanks to Matt and all the panel for taking us through the answers. We're going to change tack now. So as you know, big focus of the Crown Estate's work on round 5, and as we've spoken about a few times, is to seek to de-risk some of the processes that you'll be following in a few ways. So next we'll hear more about the work on HRA, and then on transmission, and then on surveys. And towards the end of the day, we'll have a further Q&A panel which covers these work streams. So we've now reset Slido, so please do commit questions to Slido as you have been doing on these upcoming topics. And the code is the same as before, which you should be able to see on the screen as we go through. It's not on the screen right now, but it's the same code as it was before. I think it's on the next slides. So first up is HRA, and as you know, a key change we've made this time round on leasing is to undertake a plan level HRA in advance of the tender. So I'd like to welcome Sean up to the stage to introduce this in more detail.
Perfect. So thanks very much, Johnny, and thank you to everyone else that's been presenting so far today. You've heard HRA mentioned quite a few times, and I have the joy of the responsibility for that. As a senior manager within the HRA, I have oversight across all of our HRA processes. So starting from the start, as it were, the Crown Estate is a competent authority under the habitat regulations. And within that, we therefore have legal and statutory obligations to undertake habitat regulations assessment, to assess the potential of round 5 to adversely affect protected habitats and identify appropriate mitigation measures. So this morning, we heard from Joe, who explained how our approach to spatial design has really played quite a key and pivotal role in helping de-risk the kind of spatial elements of the process. And another way we've done that, and another way we hope that we will create a smoother pathway and greater certainty for you all as you enter the tender and through into your own consenting processes, is that we've undertaken the HRA up front. By doing that, we've done it in parallel to the spatial refinement. So as the space has refined, so our assessment has refined with it. We've also, throughout this process, worked really, really closely with our HRA expert working group. That is a group made up of statutory nature conservation bodies, government departments, the marine planning statutory organisations, and also, where relevant, environmental non-governmental organisations. By working with these organisations, it allows us to understand the key challenges. Not only will we see and discharge our own statutory obligations under the legislation, it also allows us to see where some of those challenges will be coming forwards. And really, you know, we have programs in place. We have the Offshore Wind Evidence and Change Programme. There are opportunities for us to start to de-risk the process starting now. So I'm going to run you through a short agenda. I'll talk about when you will see all of that information. I know that that will be front of your minds at the moment. And by hopefully letting you know that today, we can take away some of those questions in your brain about at what point you'll have to take the environmental information on board and integrate it into the bidding process. I'll outline why we've chosen to bring forwards an upfront HRA, some of the advantages of it. And I'll also chat through where we are in the current process, some potential mitigation measures that you may see relevant to the projects in the process, and then quickly I'll chat through the next steps, so talking through the conformity check that has been mentioned quite a few times on the stage today. So first off, information, it's quite bright, isn't it? First off, the information will be available ahead of the start of the bidding cycles. We're moving towards the conclusion of our HRA process, and we hope that we will be able to make it all publicly available in the next month. This will include access to both our appropriate assessment and the report to inform appropriate assessment that sits alongside it. By making this publicly available and making it available to all of you, there will be more certainty in this process going forwards. The mitigation measures that we have identified will ultimately be included in the legal agreements that Jess, Nello and Simon talked through a little bit earlier. And finally, when you come to look at the suite of documentation that will be available to you, you'll see that we've taken a new novel approach to HRA. For our report to inform appropriate assessment, we have presented it digitally. That allows for greater interrogation of some of the methodologies, some of the data, and spatially you can start to click on the relevant designated sites and see what mitigation is relevant to what feature. By doing that, we hope that the process by which you take this information in is simpler. I say that with a hope. We all recognize that this is the first time that a digital report to inform appropriate assessment has been concluded, particularly at plan level. Using the digital approach comes with pros and cons, and I recognize that there will be ways of improving it going forwards. I'm really keen, on a personal level, to make sure we understand the pros and cons of this approach so that as we come to future processes, we can continue to learn, continue to innovate, and continue to present information in a way that it's more appropriate and easier to integrate both into conversations at project level, as well as understanding what it means for a bidding process. So why have we adopted a new approach to HRA, bringing it forwards in the process so that it is undertaken before the bidding cycles? It's an evolution from what we did at round 4. In round 4, the HRA was carried out after the bidding cycles, meaning that there was an 18-month period whereby there was uncertainty for successful developers and further technical work was ongoing. That meant that really some of those key processes that developers wanted to be kicking on were paused as we completed the process. So therefore, that's one of the kind of key reasons that we've chosen to do this plan level HRA well ahead of the auction. There are sort of 3 key reasons that we've chosen to do so. The first is to balance the needs of the environment. We've heard a lot today about the purpose and the strategy of the Crown Estate and how important nature is within that. By undertaking plan level HRA at an earlier stage, we are able to feed information into the spatial design, de-risking the consequences for the environment through the process. It also increases certainty for the bidders. You will all want to know what the consequences of a HRA are. Those consequences can have commercial implications. And so having those available to you all up front reduces some of the uncertainty that will feed into your kind of bid strategies. And finally, as I talked to earlier, it really accelerates the process. It means that subject to the conformity check, there should be very few uncertainties or timeline barriers to you entering agreements for lease following the conclusion of the leasing round. I wanted to pick up a little bit more detail around how doing this up front has fed into good environmental decision-making in spatial design. And there's two really key interfaces. The first is where the HRA and HRA information has fed directly into the spatial design, whilst the spatial design, as it evolves, has fed into the conclusions and the spatial inputs into the HABS regs assessment. The second part is around grid design. You'll all be well aware, and we'll hear a little bit more from Maurice and Graham shortly, but there is a separate holistic network design process currently ongoing for the Celtic Sea. By undertaking our HRA early, there are elements of environmental information that we have been able to pass over to the ESO at an early stage to help inform their decision-making. So I wanted to give you a brief update. We haven't yet concluded the HRA, and I can't prejudge the outcomes. However, I wanted to give you all first sight of some of the potential mitigation measures that are likely to come through this process. The first is adherence with the mitigation tiers associated with an export infrastructure risk assessment. A number of you will probably be very familiar with this from round 4, where the principles have been carried through. So hopefully there's no great surprises there. But broadly speaking, the tiers range from the adoption of best practice through to a requirement to demonstrate to the Crown Estate that you have avoided irreparable harm in your cable route identification. Secondly, we are exploring design mitigations to reduce impacts on birds. And there will be more information available on this through the publication of the HRA documents next month. But we're seeking a novel approach to ensure that the maximum level of flexibility is retained for you all so that you can design your wind farm within that flexibility, but while still seeing positive environmental outcomes. We've identified opportunities to draw together developers and regulators along with the Crown Estate to manage noisy activities. We know that noisy activities can impact on cetacean species and fish within the areas we're looking at. And therefore, by having a coordinated approach, we can make sure that the 3 sites, all in close proximity to each other, and the developers that are managing them are working together to ensure that those noises are appropriately managed so that we don't get a really big explosion up here, you know, if we're talking about UXO, and a really big explosion down here, the two both combining to have a significant effect on the populations of particularly marine mammals. And finally, we've heard a couple of times about the need to allow flexibility in export type. Particularly, you know, there are potentials for hydrogen production and production offshore. And where that is the case, we have identified the requirement for suitable consideration and subsequent mitigation to protect fish from being entrained in any water abstraction activities. So that's a bit of new information for you today, but as I said, those will be explained in a lot more detail within the documentation available next month. So finally, and in terms of our next steps for HRA. You've heard from the leasing team on the programme of stepping through towards agreement for lease. A key stage in that process will be the completion of the HRA conformity check. And the purpose of this check is to ensure that the outcomes of round 5 align with the outcomes that have been identified in the plan level HRA. The conformity check will ensure that the plan level HRA remains valid as the Crown Estate steps through into agreements for lease. And we will take into account both the outcome of the leasing round, but also any material changes in circumstances since following the conclusion of the HRA. So these could include things like changes to the conservation status of designated sites. Once the successful bidders have been confirmed, then that conformity check has been completed satisfactorily and the AFL process concluded. At that stage, we must recognise that there are further environmental considerations that will be taken into account during developers' own consenting processes. When it comes to the conformity check, I think it's really important to note that whilst it comes at the end of a process, and you'll likely perceive it as adding risk, we won't be sitting on our laurels, sitting there waiting for a surprise. We will be continuously monitoring both the progress of the tender and all of those external factors to ensure that by the time we start the tender, the likelihood of any nasty surprises is as low as it can possibly be. I hope that broadly today I've sold the idea that an integrated approach to HRA de-risks the long-term tender process, and that our evolution to HRA alongside leasing is a really positive step in making sure not only that the environment is a really core part of the development of spatial design and technical envelopes, but also by thinking really innovatively about how we deliver on our statutory obligations, we're seeking to support the wider objectives around that kind of de-risking and acceleration of deployment whilst balancing the needs of the environment. So thank you very much for that, and I look forward to questions later.
Thanks, Sean. So to maintain momentum and pace, we're going to have one more session now before we take our break, and we're going to hear about another step we're taking to de-risk floating offshore wind projects in the Celtic Sea, supporting the development of an offshore grid design for round 5. As you'll be aware, we enjoy a really close relationship with National Grid ESO, so I'm pleased to welcome Maurice Bray, our Transmission Portfolio Manager at the Crown Estate, and Graham Steen, Head of Offshore Networks at National Grid ESO, to take us through a discussion.
If someone could just switch, there we go, fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I'm Maurice Bray. I'm the Transmission Portfolio Manager in our marine business. This is a new portfolio for us. We're bringing together all electricity transmission needs under one team. So looking at connections for offshore wind, OFTOs, interconnectors, bootstraps, and all the various different aspects of the holistic network design going forward. And it's my team that will be dealing with any transmission AFLs or transmission leases with regards to round 5. I'm very pleased to be here with Graham from the Electricity System Operator, who's well known to me, and I'm sure well known to a number of you in the audience. But I wonder if, Graham, you can just introduce yourself and your role in the ESO.
Thank you, Maurice. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here in Swansea at the invitation of Maurice and the Crown Estate. Maurice did describe this session to me as a fireside chat, so we'll see how that goes. We'll do our best to follow on from Sean's very impressive piece there. I lead the offshore coordination team within what will be the Strategic Energy Planning Directorate of the Electricity System Operator. Our name will change, but yeah, that's my role at the moment, offshore coordination.
And so we're going to try and have a little bit of a chat about grid issues for the next 10 or 15 minutes or so. We could speak for hours on that, I'm sure, but we're going to spare everyone that. And instead try and draw out some of the key issues that we think you might be interested in. We're going to try and touch on 4 broad topics. Our collaboration between us, between the Crown Estate and ESO, connection agreements, the holistic network design process, which you may all be interested in, and of course, information flows and what happens next. So I'm going to start with reflections on our collaboration, and I just want to take a step back, thinking about the Offshore Transmission Network Review, which kicked off over a couple of years ago now, and I think since that there's a fair consensus that has emerged about the need to align seabed leasing and transmission network planning processes for offshore renewables. So by doing that, to help de-risk and accelerate deployment, I think the ways to achieve that for round 5 hadn't been prescribed. But from the Crown Estate's perspective, we could see that we would need to be more mindful of transmission connections in our seabed leasing plans, and we could certainly see from the HND that was published in 2022 how that was playing out for round 4, and therefore that would be important to align with for round 5, and so making sure that round 5 was within the scope of the follow-up exercise was a really important step for us. But how we could take that forward, recognising we've got separate seabed leasing processes and separate network planning process, was complex and definitely required collaboration. And that's what our teams have been working together on now for over a year. And hopefully the product of that will be a network design for the Celtic Sea region that will be available to participants before the invitation to tender stage. And we'll hear a bit more about that in due course. I wonder what your reflections are, Graham, on collaboration?
I mean, just going back a step, I mean, you've already mentioned the OTNR, the Offshore Transmission Network Review. I mean, ultimately, I mean, that's why we got involved in offshore coordination to such an extent within the electricity system operator. The UK government asked us to produce something called the Holistic Network Design, which, as Maurice said, was published in July 2022. We then moved on to producing designs for the rest of the Scotland-related generation. That's some 30 gigawatts in total, around about 80 gigawatts of an offshore fleet around Great Britain. Those designs have been developed and shared within the OTNR with the relevant developers and transmission owners, and we expect to publish them indeed in the next few weeks. And we're now currently working on designs for the Celtic Sea area, round 5, as well as Crown Estate Scotland's INTOG leasing round. So, I mean, that's sort of a long list of stuff we've done, which you're thinking that's all well and good. I think probably one of the most revealing things in all of those processes was the value in being able to share proposals and get feedback on them and collaborate, whether with developers or governmental organisations, other stakeholders. That's been hugely valuable along the way, and generally our process has got better because of that. For the Celtic Sea, I think it's as simple as we couldn't make progress without input from the Crown Estate. We couldn't produce substantive proposals. So we're really pleased to be able to do that and to collaborate, and hopefully that sets an example for lease rounds to come.
Yeah, I'm very hopeful for that as well, Graham. I'm going to turn now to connection agreements. We are often asked, are bidders going to be required to have a grid connection agreement in order to participate in the leasing round? And I think you might have sensed from our presentations earlier that that's not going to be a requirement. So the short answer is no. It's not going to be a prerequisite for being successful. Really important to be clear about that. But we have a bit of a dichotomy, and that's what Graham and I are really working on, in that there's an unprecedented amount of change going on in the electricity industry, and network planning processes, grid connection processes are beginning to change around us to more strategic and centrally led. But at the same time, as with round 4, we, the Crown Estate, are taking the position to continue to allow developers flexibility to inform us about your energy export proposals. And so that's the dichotomy we're trying to work with. So we're not stipulating grid connection, and grid connections won't be a direct part of our tender process. But we do recognise that that's a strong preference of developers, and so we want to make sure that grid connection information in round 5 is made available in a better way than in previous rounds, and so reduce uncertainty and inform better decision making on your part. But there is still the thorny issue of existing grid connections. So Graham, I'm going to ask you a direct question here. So if a developer already has a grid connection agreement, what should they expect to happen to it? Or if a developer doesn't have a grid connection agreement already, can they apply within the current framework, and what should they expect?
So I'll try and answer that question as best I can. I'm sure you'll tell me if I haven't. But so at the moment, we've got 30 gigawatts of prospective round 5 projects with connection agreements, and they've got what we call holding offers, and they've got all sorts of terms and conditions with them, and they do offer some protections in terms of the conversations that we can have with developers and vice versa. So those holding offers are useful from all sorts of perspectives. But with respect to the leasing process, I think it's as simple as if you have a holding offer and you're successful in the lease process, that will then lead into receiving a contract that reflects the recommended design and the lease that you've been awarded. It will set out the network reinforcement requirements and the dates and all the terms and conditions around that. And at that point, you have a clear contractual commitment. But there's 4.5 gigawatts of capacity available in the leasing round, so that means 4.5 gigawatts of connection offers will be the result. For contracts in situations where there is no lease option, then ultimately we can't take them forward, and in this case, ultimately they will be terminated. What all this flags up is that there's a period of time during which essentially you don't have an offer which gives you absolute clarity about the way forwards, which leaves uncertainty. But what can we do to try and deal with that? There's a couple of things that we can do before the ITT process opens, is first of all collaborate as much as we possibly can with developers in our design process and share as much information as we can. We might come back to that later as well. But also we'd like to share a bit more detail with developers on the precise process for converting holding offers into substantive connection offers, and really just work on ways of providing more certainty over location and timing in that discussion as well.
Yeah, and we'll come back to that. That's a really important point, to try and remove uncertainty from that process. But we're going to turn now to the holistic network design process that you're leading, Graham, your team's leading. And so our shared ambition is to try and be as transparent, linking to what Graham just said there about sort of involving developers in ideas and designs. Our intention is to be as transparent as possible, but also clear on what each of us do and don't do. So seabed leasing, very much our responsibility in the Crown Estate, grid connections and recommendations from the H&D, very much Graham and his team's responsibility. Your team's been working on the H&D with us. We've been supporting you now for well over a year. You had a workshop back in November in Bristol, which I thought went really well from my perspective, but you brought forward there a number of design options, and you're in the process of evaluating those further. But for anyone who wasn't at that event in November, would you mind just sort of recapping on what you covered and some of the sort of themes that came out of it?
Sure, I'll try and do that as quickly as possible. Glad you enjoyed it. That was good.
I did.
The design workshops, they're not particularly complicated. They are a really important feature of our process because they allow us to make a big step forward just by sharing what we're thinking, what we're doing, and then getting the direct feedback. Sometimes that feedback is written, sometimes it's verbal, sometimes it's non-verbal, just in terms of people's facial expression. It's good to see it in person. In Bristol, we welcomed representatives from our Celtic Sea Working Group, the Celtic Sea Community Working Group and Generation Project developers. So thank you to everyone who did attend and made the effort to travel. As I said, they're pretty straightforward. In the mornings, we do presentations sharing design proposals. We get feedback from a large audience there. And generally in the afternoons, we move into breakout sessions, either to look at more specific technical issues or specific feedback on the designs. There were some themes that were emerging from the workshop, questions over supply chain constraints and technical capabilities, thoughts over which PDAs might be easier to connect and which might be more difficult, questions over connection timing, which comes back to connection agreements, also questions over future-proofing, which we can do to a certain extent, but there are limits to what we can do in the designs themselves. But the main purpose of those workshops is to have a conversation about the design proposals, and we can get direct feedback on where we're heading in the right direction and where perhaps we might have to rethink our assumptions.
Yeah, and I think there's more dialogue that we're having with the ESO that's looking beyond round 5. But I think hopefully what we can help deliver for round 5 is a holistic network design recommendation that aligns with our seabed process and helps your commercial decision making. For a wrap up, Graham, as much as I'm really enjoying this. I want to touch on what happens next and try and give a bit of clarity for our audience on a couple of key points. First one is, of course, when and how and if the HND recommendation will be made available. And I know you're working on that just now, but is there any updates that you could give, timing or if and how the recommendations will be published?
Sure. We're firmly committed to sharing the Celtic Sea recommendations ahead of the ITT phase of the seabed leasing process. We'll do that through our working groups and make sure that that's as visible as possible. We have got other publications going out this spring, so that will probably follow on. We need to publish to some of the recommendations which I described earlier relating to ScotWind. That will be within our which is provisionally titled the TCSMP suite of publications. It will have a snappier name, but that's coming out in the next few weeks. But for the Celtic Sea related designs, we need to complete our final strategic options appraisal process. That gives us an additional level of detail with a particular focus on onshore network requirements and timing. For shortlisted designs. We then need to share that in workshops, and those workshops need to be timetabled. And we're working on the plan for that, so we will share the precise timing for those as soon as we can.
Fantastic. My second point is on, I suppose, the level of detail that could come associated with that design recommendation. And I'm certainly interested, I'm sure maybe members of the audience are as well, about how you might be treating the relative positions of the 3 PDAs in the connection queue, and how that might affect connection dates, even if they are indicative and if they would be available. We can certainly see a strong argument for the 3 PDAs being at the top of the offshore wind stack that you mentioned earlier, but what might you expect to be published alongside the recommendation later this year in that regard?
Certainly, we will share our approach with developers through our work groups. What I can share with you now is that we've got a strong preference for an approach that gives the outcome you described in terms of stacking and queuing. We need to work through that process and make sure it doesn't impact inappropriately on parties outside of the round 5 process. It basically make sure there's no risk of challenge and delay from that. But we'll share those thoughts again ahead of the ITT phase.
Thank you, Graham. And I think we can all be encouraged by that. Look forward to that. And now we'll wrap up. Just to reflect on some of the key points that hopefully has come across. One is to expect of further engagement on the holistic network design as Graham and his team moves forward to the final design recommendations. I hope it was helpful to hear a bit about how existing connection agreements would be handled and treated, and indeed any new ones. I thought it was really helpful to hear, Graham, about ESO's commitment to the network design recommendations being available before we start the ITT phase. So I hope that's going to be a key takeaway for everyone here today. And indeed, that you're working on how to convert holding offers into connection offers, and we'll hear more about that as you've just alluded to. Hopefully, everyone in the audience sort of recognises by our cosy and intimate chat here that we do have a shared commitment to make round 5 and the HND follow-up processes a success. That's in all of our interests. So if we're not eradicating grid risk, we're certainly identifying it and trying to manage it in everyone's interest. So from my part, I just want to say a big thank you, Graham, for taking the time out of your busy schedule and being here today, joining us, supporting us in the Crown Estate, and also my collective thanks to your team and the ESO more generally for your continued support to this process. And I do know you'll be joining us in the Q&A session shortly. So thank you very much, Graham.
Thank you, Maurice.
Great, thanks for that, Graham and Maurice. So we're going to take a short break now. It was due to be 15 minutes. I think we're meant to be back if we're on schedule at 10:02. I suggest if we're back, definitely to start at 5:02. And when we come back, we'll be hearing, there'll be information on pre-consenting surveys, and we'll then hear from UK and Welsh Government officials as well as UK Infrastructure Bank. Just one point on Slido. I think if you get any questions on the de-risking session in by 3:10, please, if that would be the cut-off in terms of just making sure we can include those in the Q&A towards the end of the day. So thank you for that, and see you back shortly.